So, with Kurama now re-entering the fold as one of Boruto's more important characters again, I feel that now is as good a time as any to have a real sit-down conversation about who Kurama is as a character and what their backstory was like. See, Kurama has forever been an incredibly important character in Naruto's universe. However, because of him pseudo-dying in chapter 52 of Boruto and not coming back until a couple of chapters ago, it feels as though his importance has waned. At least a little bit. However, now that it's been revealed that Himawari is not only the jinchuriki of Kurama, but also possibly the strongest jinchuriki we've ever seen, it seems as though Kurama is about to be as important and as popular as he's ever been in the Naruto universe. Because, while yes, technically the jinchuriki is no longer the main character of the story, Himawari is a massively beloved and important character in the Boruto universe, and I genuinely believe from the bottom of my heart she's about to take a massive step forward in terms of plot importance, acting essentially as the Naruto Jr. that Boruto was supposed to not be. But before Kurama truly comes back into the fold of importance in the Boruto universe, I want to make sure that we all understand who he is as a character. I want to make sure we all understand his motivations, what he's been through, what his history is, how he was created, how his power has been leveraged, how his power may exist inside of Himawari. In essence, I want to break down everything there is to break down about Kurama so that nothing comes as a surprise in Boruto. Because today we're talking you know nothing about Kurama, a you-know-nothing we somehow haven't done yet. And they said there's no way you can talk about Naruto 3 times a week for 3 years, and yet, here we are. But before we get to diving deep on everybody's favorite nine-tailed fox guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling especially generous, go ahead and follow my other channel where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk about all other anime and manga, The Weeb Commander. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow my brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Talkers Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But before we get into all that, today we're going to talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Factor. Factor is an absolute must for you this summer, as Factor allows you to fuel up fast on dietitian-approved, absolutely delicious meals that only take 2 minutes to get ready. And in these warm, sunny months, as some of us emerge from our winter caves, the idea of being stuck in grocery stores or the kitchen cooking up lunch or dinner is just not the play. But Factor offers so much more than just these delicious dietitian-approved and never-frozen meals, as they also offer snacks, smoothies, and so much more. They provide you with a wide variety of easy options for your day, whether that be breakfast, midday bites, or anything else. And let me just tell you, Factor plays a massive role in my life. As somebody who runs 3 YouTube channels and is in the process of making a 4th, I don't have hours to spend thinking about what I'm gonna eat and preparing it. But at the same time, fitness and health is massively important to me, which is why Factor's fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved, and delicious meals are huge for me. But there's a big difference between telling and showing. So let's head down to the kitchen and show you just how delicious these meals are. Today we're making some creamy Parmesan chicken.
And making a Factor meal is as easy as taking that slide off, poking a couple of holes in our foil here, and throwing this meal in the microwave for a grand total of 2 minutes.
And now for the all-important taste test.
Somehow that chicken is still incredibly juicy. It's well seasoned. It's perfect.
Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code NCHammer2350 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code NCHammer2350 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. It's time to take back your time. So, in order to really break down Kurama's character, we're going to start this video off in the way that we tend to start these kinds of videos off. At the beginning. See, when it comes down to it, Kurama's one of the oldest characters in the entirety of the Naruto universe. Not quite as old as Hashirama or Hamura or Kaguya, but older than every other human or even sage entity on the planet, outside of the Great Toad Sage. And even that's kind of up in the air. The Great Toad Sage being alive and training Hashirama to be a sage is not canon. See, Kurama came into being during the last couple of days of Hashirama Otsutsuki's living life. See, while it's relatively commonplace knowledge that Hashirama was the person who created Kurama and the rest of the tailed beasts, an aspect that's usually ignored about that story is the fact that it happened at the end of Hashirama's life. And for really good reason. See, if you think about it, based off what we know about jinchuriki, Hashirama, as the jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, acknowledged his life was coming to an end, and soon. Now, this is because Hashirama was half human, which meant he didn't have the immortality genes of his mother and the rest of the Otsutsuki. But Hashirama dying as the jinchuriki of the Ten Tails would not have been a good thing. Now, while we can't necessarily say as to whether or not Hashirama knew that if he died as the jinchuriki, the tailed beast that he was the jinchuriki of would reform in 3 or so years, it's probably safest to assume that he did know that. And thus if Hashirama died and Hamura was either on the moon or already dead, the Earth would be left with practically no defenders against the Ten Tails who would reform in a matter of years. And while it is obviously a possibility that Hashirama could have passed down the chakra of the Ten Tails to his favorite son, Asura, this would have created a cycle throughout the bloodline of Hashirama that would have required the passing down of the Ten Tails to each new generation, which left the door open to a lot of bad possibilities, like the fact that one day the Otsutsuki blood would be too weak to be able to handle the Ten Tails, which is an incredibly fair and legitimate concern. We consider the fact that Obito was barely able to handle the Ten Tails, and Obito was half white Zetsu. And thus Hashirama needed to do something with this massive chakra inside of him that wasn't just passing it down. And thus Hashirama decided to take this massive ball of nature energy and give it ego. And that creation that came from this massive well of power was the nine-tailed beasts. Now, we're not entirely sure as to why the nine-tailed beasts weren't made equally, but they weren't. And while this isn't a confirmed theory, it seems as though the more tails that a tailed beast had, the stronger that they were. Now, this obviously hasn't been confirmed, though Itachi does tell us that if Kurama isn't sealed last, he'll destroy the ghetto statue, which seemed to imply that Kurama was stronger than all the other tailed beasts combined. Now, this could have obviously just been a way for the spy that was Itachi to protect Naruto in the interest of Konoha for a little bit longer. However, the actions of Kyuki and Kurama during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War seem to imply that they're of a different cloth than the other tailed beasts. And when you consider the idea of the lore behind foxes and kitsune in Japan, at which point it gains a massive amount of power, that it would make sense that the more tails a tailed beast have, the more power that tailed beast has. Now, Hashirama, after creating the nine-tailed beast, told all of them that they would forever be connected to each other. And most likely what he's implying here is that because they're all made from the same massive nature energy, that regardless of how far away they were from each other, they'd always be connected through spiritual energy. Because connection through spiritual energy was kind of Hashirama's entire thing. On top of this, Hashirama pseudo warned the tailed beasts that one day that they would all come back together, and that at that time somebody would emerge who would show them all what true power really was. Now, this statement can be interpreted in a couple of different ways. See, there is multiple different times that the tailed beasts all come back together, whether it's the ghetto statue or when they all existed inside of Naruto. And these two separate scenarios, two separate people, showed them what true power looked like. Madara as the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki brought them all back together, but Naruto as a pseudo Ten-Tails Jinchuriki showed them that they can all exist separately but use their power together. Now, it was after this pseudo warning that Hashirama sent all of the nine-tailed beasts to separate parts of the continent that Naruto exists on. And Hashirama decides to send Kurama to a temple. Now, it's obviously a reference to the fact that kitsunes are usually tied to temples in one way or another in Japanese folklore. Whether it's as temple guardians masquerading as humans who run temples, or that the Japanese god of rice, Kami Inari, was a fox and therefore one of the most popular shrines in the entirety of Japan, Inari Shrine, is adorned with foxes everywhere. Now, this area that Kurama was sent to would later become the Land of Fire. And even though Kurama lived in a highly populated region, that doesn't mean that Kurama was always the nicest to humans. See, we learned from Jiraiya in chapter 140 that Kurama has appeared multiple times in eras of consequence over the last 1,000 or so years. And every single time that Kurama appeared over the course of the last 1,000 or so years, he destroyed everything around him, killing thousands, if not millions of people. And thus in the Land of Fire, up until Kurama was sealed into a series of different jinchuriki in Konoha, he was thought to be one of the divine retributions of the world, a devious and malignant spirit who would bring forward the end times. And based off what we know about kitsunes, this makes a fair amount of sense. See, kitsune, well, they come in a bunch of different forms, usually come in one of two forms: Zenko and Yako. Now, Zenko kitsune usually perform roles for humanity such as being messengers. However, Yako kitsune are the trickster foxes. Foxes that would use their shape-shifting abilities to trick humanity into doing their deeds. And thus the messaging revolving around kitsune in Japanese folklore is semi-conflicted, and so is the story of Kurama. However, while Kurama had appeared in the Land of Fire as the divine retribution spirit meant to kill the entirety of humanity a couple of times over the last 1,000 or so years that he'd been living inside the temple that Hashirama placed him in, Kurama's first real meeting of any import with humanity was with the Golden Silver Brothers, Kinkaku and Ginkaku, who are rather appropriately named after two of the most important and famous temples in Japan, the Kinkaku and Ginkaku Shrines, also known as the Gold and Silver Shrines. Now, I mean, the Gold and Silver Shrines are also named after two characters from the Journey to the West, but whatever, ignore that. But anyways, during the initial foundations of all of the shinobi villages, the first Raikage, who was modeled after Jimi Hendrix, decided to send the Gold and Silver brothers to capture Kurama. However, Kinkaku and Genkaku aren't successful in this endeavor and are instead swallowed by Kurama. However, because Kinkaku and Genkaku were far off descendants of Hagoromo and incredibly powerful, the brothers survived inside of Kurama's stomach for 2 whole weeks. They also nourished themselves by eating Kurama's stomach for those 2 weeks, which eventually forced Kurama to regurgitate them because they gave him an upset tummy. So yeah, Kinkaku and Genkaku went after Kurama before Madara, which obviously makes sense, just a lot of people don't come to that conclusion. If Kinkaku and Genkaku hadn't got after Kurama prior to Madara stealing him and using him in the battle against Hashirama, they never would have had the opportunity because Hashirama had Kurama. However, that was the next thing that happened to Kurama. See, anywhere between 5 and 10 years after the creation of Konoha, we don't know how long Madara decided to hang out, Madara defected, and the key point of his defection was to find the supernatural, divine punishment spirit that lived somewhere in a temple in the Land of Fire to use that power to defeat Hashirama and to take over Konoha for himself. And thus Madara followed the tales of Kurama until eventually he was able to stumble upon the temple that Kurama lived in, at which point he used his Sharingan to control Kurama and bring his massive amount of power into his final battle with Hashirama. And this battle was so incredibly massive in its scale that it created the Valley of the End, which is why Madara and Hashirama are now there as statues standing across from each other. But fortunately for humanity, Hashirama comes out victorious in this battle. And thus not only is Madara killed at the end of this fight, but Kurama is taken. See, because Wood Release, for a reason that's never yet been explained, is incredibly powerful against tailed beasts. Unless Hashirama's Wood Release allowed for him to punch a Susanoo off Kurama. However, Hashirama, being the Hokage that he was, or just because Tobirama told him to, decided to take Kurama's power for his own, or at least for the villages. As after his victory over Madara, Hashirama decided to seal Kurama inside of Mito Uzumaki, his wife. And this is probably why Tsunade doesn't have whiskers. See, one of the biggest retorts you'll get when you say that Naruto, Boruto, and Himawari have whiskers because Kurama was involved in their parentage in some way or another is,
well, if Boruto, Naruto, and Himawari have whiskers, why doesn't Tsunade? She's the granddaughter of Hashirama and Mito.
And the answer to that question is relatively simple. Kurama wasn't sealed inside of Mito until well after her and Hashirama had their children. Hashirama met a 2 to 3 year old Tsunade. That's his granddaughter, which means that his children would have had to at least been 23-ish, which is already putting a huge stretch on how long we thought Hashirama was Hokage in the first place. And thus him and Mito had to get after it basically as fast as they could in order to fill that timeline. And the fact that Madara was in the village for at least a couple of years after the foundation of Konoha before he defected and brought Kurama to Hashirama, which means, yeah, Kurama probably wasn't involved in the creation of one of Tsunade's parents, and thus, no whiskers. However, people assume that it's the beginning of this cycle of Kurama being passed down from one jinchuriki to the next in Konoha's history that made Kurama this evil entity. And while that may possibly be it, that could be why Kurama hates humanity, considering the fact that Jiraiya said the Land of Fire has thought about Kurama as divine retribution for almost 1,000 years, makes me feel as though Kurama never really gave humanity a chance. See, obviously in the case of tailed beasts like Shukaku, the way the tailed beasts are treated by villages, and therefore by extension their jinchuriki, massively influences how they feel about humanity as a whole. However, basically everything we know about Kurama seems to point towards the fact that he never loved them to begin with, which kind of makes the relationship he eventually forms with Naruto all the more impressive, as the only human that Kurama ever loved prior to that was Hagoromo, his creator. On top of this, when it comes down to the Jinchuriki and village situation, Kurama's had pretty much the best roll of the dice possible. He's had a series of incredibly empathetic and understanding Jinchuriki, coupled with the fact that his first 2 Jinchuriki never tried to use him in combat. On top of this, it's not like he's constantly being switched from one Jinchuriki to the other, as the long-livedness of the Uzumaki made it so Kurama held on to one Jinchuriki for a fair amount of time, and in no case is that more accurate than with his first Jinchuriki, Mito. See, like we've already established, Kurama was sealed in Mito after Hashirama and Madara's final battle, and because Mito was a full-blooded Uzumaki, and a powerful one at that, she actually basically outlived everybody who founded Konoha, living through both the first and second Great Shinobi World Wars as the Jinchuriki of Kurama. Now, Kurama was sealed into Mito using the 8 trigram seal, the same thing that would be used on Kushina Kushina and Naruto, because she was an Uzumaki, and therefore using Uzumaki Fuinjutsu just kind of makes sense. But because of this, and because of the Minato one-shot, we know that the way that Mito was able to keep Kurama at bay was actually kind of Hashirama. See, because it was revealed during the Minato one-shot that keeping a part of a person you love inside of the 8 trigram seal is actually what keeps the tailed beast at bay. For Mito, it was Hashirama, for Kushina, it was Minato, and for Naruto, it was Kushina and kind of Minato. And the only time that Mito ever struggled as the jinchuriki of Kurama was when she gave birth to what we can assume was her second child.
But Nick, didn't you just say that Kurama had nothing to do with the parentages of the people that Hashirama and Mito made?
Yeah, I did. Kind of. So yeah, the reason that we know that seals get weak during pregnancy is because Mito had to deal with it during one of her pregnancies. However, we have no idea how many kids Hashirama and Mito had. Well, obviously, one of the children that Hashirama and Mito had went on to have Tsunade, and that's why Tsunade is related to Hashirama. That doesn't mean that the child that almost broke the 8 trigram seal would eventually become Tsunade's parent. In fact, that doesn't make any sense because of what we've already established. The timeline of Hashirama's Hokage-ship is already stretched if you assume that him and Mito made Tsunade's parent on the first day they met. You add the 5 possible years it took for Madara to defect, the couple of months it took for him to find Kurama, Kurama being sealed into Mito, Mito then going through an entire pregnancy right after becoming a jinchuriki, because the timelines get real hazy and not great. So when you couple up the timeline bit with the fact that Tsunade doesn't have whiskers, well then, yeah, it makes a fair amount of sense that they had multiple children. However, Mito was not immortal, just Uzumaki, and therefore somewhere in the lead up / beginning of the Second Great Shinobi World War, it was decided that a new jinchuriki needed to be found for Kurama, and one from her clan, the Uzumakis. And thus Mito passed down Kurama to Kushina. Now, because she was a full-blooded Uzumaki and her life force was so incredibly powerful, the loss of Kurama did not kill her. In fact, she went to live on for multiple more years, teaching Kushina about what it was to be the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, which is why she plays a somewhat critical role in Minato's one-shot, teaching Kushina about how if she fills her life with love, she'll be able to counterbalance the hatred and vitriol of the fox that lives inside her. And thus Kushina was able to keep a part of Minato inside of her seal to stop Kurama from coercing her into breaking the seal. And thus she was able to use love to remain the Jinchuriki of Kurama. And thus she would stay the Jinchuriki of Kurama for not nearly as long as Mito, but still a pretty good length of time. About a decade and a half. That is until, of course, she fell pregnant with Naruto. Most likely somewhere near the conclusion of the Third Great Shinobi World War. And thus after the conclusion of that war, special arrangements had to be made to make sure that she would be able to give birth to Naruto in a safe situation. However, somehow the news of her going into labor leaked out to Obito. And thus Obito, on the night of Naruto's birth, tracked her down, killed her escorts, one of which was Hiruzen's wife, and took Naruto hostage. Now, because Kushina needed a Fuinjutsu specialist to stay beside her as she gave birth to Naruto, making sure that her 8 trigram seal was not destroyed, Obito killing everybody who was there to help her made it so Kurama was able to be released into the village. And now, while we can't necessarily say that Kurama would have just destroyed the village if he was released, we, unfortunately for Kurama, don't really have to take a guess. See, because the second that Kurama was released from Kushina, he was placed under control by Obito to rampage inside of Konoha, but not before he told Kurama to kill Kushina. Now, obviously, Kurama, who at this moment held a massive amount of hate for Konoha and humanity and the people who had forced him to live inside a human for the last 70 or so years, took this opportunity to destroy as many things as he possibly could. And really, we can't necessarily blame him. Kurama's existence prior to this moment of being released was that of a prisoner. His power wasn't being used to make Konoha stronger, it was just being held on to make sure that other villages couldn't access it. We often talk about Hashirama collecting all the tailed beasts and how it was such a noble and important and sick thing that he did, but if you think about it for even 2 seconds, it's kind of just slavery. Hagoromo, the man presumably god of the ninja world, took an entire mass of energy and gave it ego. The tailed beasts can think, speak, interact with, love, and hate like humans. And that's because they were made with humans in mind. They're supposed to be guardian deities of the planet, and yet they were sealed inside of humans and used as battery packs for massive nuclear-powered ninja mechs. However, Kurama didn't even get the honor of being a battery. Kurama just simply had to live inside a cage, inside people he'd never known before. He kind of had every right to be pissed. All he wanted to do was live at his temple, and protect the land of fire, like how Hashirama told him to do thousands of years ago. And while he was always an entity of mass power and wrath like we've already established, so long as he was being left alone, something that the foundation of the ninja villages seemed to very much mess with, he was fine. And the anger and resentment he held towards humanity, and more specifically Konoha, really showed when during Minato and Obito's battle, Minato was able to place a contract seal on Obito, which released Kurama from Obito's control. And yet Kurama continued to rampage inside of Konoha, even going so far as to try and fire a tailed beast ball into its center, which would have devastated the entire village. However, fortunately for Konoha, and I guess the redemption arc of Kurama, Minato was able to drop Gamabunta on top of Kurama, teleport away the tailed beast ball, and then seal away Minato inside of his son and a little bit inside of himself. Now, the reason that Minato decided to go through with this plan was because he knew that the Masked Man was going to continue to be a threat, and therefore that his son would need an ability or a power that would allow him to battle against this Masked Man. However, he also knew that a baby wouldn't be able to control the entirety of Kurama, and therefore he decided to seal half of Kurama inside of Naruto and the other half inside of himself. He also did this because he knew that if Kurama wasn't given a host, he would reincarnate somewhere else. And thus, once again, Kurama's power was deemed too powerful to exist without the control of humanity. An interesting through line that runs throughout the entirety of Kurama's life: control and humanity feeling threatened. And rather interestingly, Kurama is often demonized for rallying against this system. And I've always found that interesting. Now, does Kurama make any decisions prior to the beginning of his relationship with Naruto that would make you believe that he's even a slightly good person? No, especially when you consider the fact that when Kurama realized that Minato was trying to seal half of him inside of Naruto, he tried to kill a baby. But to Kurama, that baby's not a baby. That baby is prison. 70 more years of being locked behind bars with no freedom. Is it the craziest thing that he wanted that baby dead? No. Is it the craziest thing that Kurama wanted to rage out of Naruto and be free from his vessel? No. Unless over the course of the years living inside of Naruto, because Naruto didn't have anybody in his life to fill it with love, at least not in the same way that Mito and Kushina had, Kurama was able to constantly weaken the 8 trigram seal by leaking out bits of chakra to Naruto that Naruto would use. And thus, as Naruto bathed in the positive effects of Kurama's chakra, Kurama was slowly but surely weakening the seal on Naruto. Slowly but surely trying to vie for his freedom. Because the second that the 8 trigram seal was broken, Kurama would once again be free. Now, whether that meant destroying Konoha, destroying the world, or just going back to his temple, we can't say. To this day, I still have a really hard time blaming him. And this would be Naruto and Kurama's relationship for almost the entirety of Naruto, up until Naruto has a heartfelt conversation with Son Goku, who's under the control of Obito. See, because when Kurama hears Naruto and Son Goku's relationship and hears about how Naruto wants to help the tailed beasts, and especially Kurama, and become friends with them, Kurama reflects back on Naruto's life and realizes what he's overcome, what he's had to go through, mostly because of Kurama making him suffer. And it's at this moment that Kurama realizes that Naruto's not like the rest of humanity, that he's more akin to the one human that he's ever loved, Hashirama, than anybody else. And thus in this moment of realization, of Kurama realizing that Naruto does genuinely hold love for him, regardless of how Kurama has treated him his entire life, and because of what he's been through, because of the fact that he had Kurama inside of him, Kurama decides to reach his fist out to Naruto, and when Naruto hits his fist with his own, the gates fly wide open. And it's this moment that Naruto and Kurama acknowledge each other as friends and legitimate teammates, fighting for the collective good of Konoha. And this was really just the beginning of their friendship. See, the opening of the gates and the creation of KCM2 is the beginning of what becomes a long and very meaningful friendship to both Kurama and Naruto. As with time, Kurama eventually brings himself so far as to proudly proclaim that Naruto is his friend, to proudly admit that he has faith in him, and to say that if anybody's going to be able to carry on the will of Minato and Jiraiya, it would be none other than Naruto. He even goes so far as to abandon his grudge against Minato for sealing him inside of Naruto, eventually realizing that it was for the best. But this is a two-way street, because the foundation of KCM2 and the allowance of using it for a certain amount of time means that Naruto needs to entrust control of his body over to Kurama. When Neji dies in Naruto's arms, Kurama's the first person to remind him that Neji sacrificed himself for the continuance of Naruto's legacy, and that his parents did something very similar 16 years ago. But the truest testament to the continuance of the bond building between Kurama and Naruto was after the defeat of Kaguya and the Ten Tails, when all of the tailed beasts were free. And while it was Hashirama who requested that Kurama stay with Naruto, Hashirama does say to Kurama that it's no longer a burden. Yes? To which Kurama meekly responds by saying, no, it's not. However, there are more examples of Kurama existing outside of Naruto and willingly choosing to go back to him. In Boruto, there's multiple times that Kurama is able to control some kind of chakra entity outside of Naruto's body. Whether it was in Naruto the Last, where Naruto was able to separate Kurama from himself entirely so that Kurama could go battle against a stone golem while he fought Toneri, or in Boruto, when Kurama floats outside of Naruto's body to talk to people like Boruto or Kawaki. Prior to Kurama's death, he had every opportunity and right to leave Naruto, and yet he never did. Even going so far as to guarantee that the only time that they would be separated is if Kurama was putting his life on the line for Naruto with Baryon mode. And thus no moment truly cemented how close these two were until Kurama was willing to die for Naruto. Something that nobody could have even deemed imaginable almost 40 years ago when Kurama was trying to kill the very baby that was Naruto. And that's the beauty of Kurama and Naruto's relationship. See, because genuinely, as I sit here and tell you, Kurama had every right to hate Naruto and humanity. Sure, you can make the argument that he never gave humanity much of a chance, and that's kind of why he was created, to protect humanity, but humanity never gave him much of a chance either. And therefore, while the establishment of their friendship is usually accredited to Naruto's ability to forgive Kurama for being who he is, at the same time, I would argue that at least 50% of that credit should go to Kurama, who had to realize everything that Naruto had been through because of him, and identify that, hey, maybe he's just like me, and that takes an incredible amount of self-awareness. But now Kurama's in an entirely different position, now existing inside of Naruto's daughter, Himawari, with only a percentage of him and no seal. And genuinely, this kind of thing couldn't have happened without Naruto and Kurama's relationship. See, yes, the most likely reason that Kurama is reforming inside of Himawari is because Himawari holds on to a part of Kurama's DNA on account of the fact that she's the third generation of Kurama Jinchuriki. Kushina, Naruto, Himawari. And therefore, as she was holding on to a sliver of Kurama's chakra, she's acting as a magnet, sucking in the rest of Kurama's chakra that's scattered across the world. However, that's not usually how that works. How it usually works is that Kurama, or any tailed beast who died, would reappear somewhere else on Earth. And thus we kind of have to assume that the reason that Kurama's reappearing inside of Himawari is because he wants to. I mean, yes, he himself has admitted to the fact that he doesn't understand why he's reappearing in Himawari, but at the same time, he's not trying to leave Himawari. He is now once again sentient, and he is not sealed in Himawari. While the possible establishment of a relationship between Himawari and Kurama could give us some insight to how the Shinju work, as Jura himself said that Himawari appears to be closer to them in terms of genetic makeup than humans, I can't help but feel as though Kurama could leave whenever he wants to. But I think that's why Himawari is going to be so incredibly powerful. And I think that's why she's being actively compared to the Shinju. Himawari is the first Jinchuriki in the history of Jinchuriki whose tailed beast willingly was sealed inside of her. Now, you could obviously make the argument that Naruto was kind of that after the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, but that's not how Kurama and Naruto's relationship started. And therefore, with Kurama reforming inside of Himawari willingly, kind of like maxing out your friendship stats on your Pokemon, this could lead to greater symbiosis, which is why Himawari is able to do things like heal fatal injuries on other people and fix her broken arms in an instant. It's why she doesn't have to manifest some kind of chakra cloak to cover herself in Kurama's chakra, and instead is able to just access his power in her human form. Kurama identified the fact that Naruto is going to be the person to pass on Jiraiya and Minato's legacies, and he was willing to help Naruto in that endeavor, but currently he can't help Naruto in that endeavor, and so he's elected to continue carrying that torch in Himawari. And we understand that understanding Himawari's new form becomes a whole lot easier, because it really always has and always will boil down to Kurama. And thank God for that, because he's one of my favorite characters. And if he wasn't one of your favorite characters before this video, hopefully he is now. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What's your favorite thing about Kurama? Your favorite mannerism, your favorite moment, so on and so forth. Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I'm gonna go work out. It's chest day.